Morning, group. I want to take a little bit of time as you guys move from the Roman Empire to the next phase of European history, Western Civ, and that's the Middle Ages. Uh, One of the things I better clarify right away: when you hear the term Dark Ages, that's synonymous. It's the same thing as when talking about the early Middle Ages. I tend to use the terminology of the Dark Ages, even though it has some connotations that aren't necessarily historically terribly accurate, but it does help students to understand the overall principles and concepts. So you can interchange them, use them as you want. Just understand we're talking about the same thing: Dark Ages and early Middle Ages. So you'll be looking at the period roughly from 500 to approximately 1400 or 1500, depending on how you slice it. Different historians slice the Middle Ages in three component parts that way. The late beginning being the, excuse me, let me go back over that. The early, the high, and then the late Middle Ages, the late being the last period, which transcends into the Renaissance. Probably that's one of those historical periods that you've least heard the terminology about. But I need to get going quickly, so you're going to see, I'm going to give you a little PowerPoint, one page PowerPoint that has these points, but I want to go over them real quickly, and you got to get the notes in between here, and I'll try to keep this relatively brief. So it's just going to be a sketch. We'll go over these. As I've told you many times, we're looking for concepts, big principles, shifts in power. Again, we're always back to that theme of what happens to power, who has that power, how they exercise it, how they gain more power, and what that power looks like. And man, is there going to be a transformation here from the Roman world. So from the continuity and the stability of the Roman world over 1,000 years, period of full millennium, to the freewheeling return to the jungle, land of survival of the fittest, of particularly the Dark Ages. So we begin with this idea that reason and logic is replaced basically by such issues as reason, or excuse me, as religion, and ideas associated with feudalism. So both for Catholicism, which it'll be at this point, and for feudalism, which will be the social organization that will supersede the chaos of the Dark Ages and sort of reform society. That becomes one of those overriding themes where reason and logic, those overriding philosophies of the Hellenistic world, are now secondary. Chaos. Chaos replaces security. So even though the period of the Roman world was basically war interrupted by peace occasionally, chaos reigns, particularly for the first 500 years, which is called the Dark or Early Ages. This is whoever's the most powerful carries the day. Whoever has the most men in the field, whoever has the best strategy, whoever can basically steal the most from his competitors, that becomes who is powerful. And chaos reigns because you have this whole group of warlords and small kings who basically attempt to fill that power vacuum left by the void of the Roman Empire. Power becomes localized is another point. So this society becomes based more on small regions, small kingdoms that can be put together. Everything is freeform with no defined borders initially, with very little ideas of like who owns property, the whole idea of private property is out the door, something that the Roman world, even protected in its judicial system. So power becomes localized, and so you have a whole series of laws and regulations and control by groups who have no interest in standardizing this or making laws universal. The law is whatever the most powerful person says the law is at that given time. And it's not written down, certainly. Education, next point, has little to no relevance. So without education, you can imagine what happens to development and progress, to learning. So such things as progress and development, it may be in weapons, but it's certainly not going to be necessarily in technological developments of infrastructure, of architecture, science and math. What purpose do concepts and practices like this hold? Little to none in the jungle, the survival of the fittest. That next point, survival over advancement, I can say I pretty much covered most of that. The way I often characterize the early Middle Ages is life was short, violent, and brutish. People lived very short periods of time. Health was of little to no concern. So in the chaotic world, basically your goal was not to what can we create, what can we learn, what can we develop that we have it. It becomes, can my family and I survive to the next day? And so you plan around that whole concept of my job is to get to that next point, which is tomorrow. And you can imagine what that does in terms of societal advancements. And then the last point here as I close up is this becomes an agricultural society. So you move from the urbanization to the focus of civilization being in these great cities like you had in the Roman Empire, particularly places, of course, like London and even Paris a bit, but in particular Rome and some of the other great cities along the Mediterranean basin, like Alexandria. They become of little to no importance because that just basically paints a big target on you. So if you have a lot of goodies, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of wealth, well, you have a mark on your back for your competitor who's trying to steal from you. So instead, you basically have a society based on land. Land and men are power once again. Urban society disappears, and with it all the progress that urban centers bring, and they do. And basically, power is housed and stored in rural areas that are much easier to protect, and you need land to basically feed your population and to feed your army. And so economic developments, of course, and trade which go along with urban centers are greatly diminished in this period. So concluding here, the key to this, people, is power is just reshaped. Who has it? The most powerful. Where is it located? In agricultural settings. What's the goals of society? Is to basically thump the other guy over the head, take what they have, and to grow your power by stealing. Chaos reigns, and in the end, you're going to see institutions like the church and less formal institutions, but nonetheless very powerful, feudalism sort of reorganize societies as you move into the late and high Middle Ages. Well, there you go, guys. That's your overview. Hopefully you got a few good notes, and you're going to move on today and you're going to watch a couple of overview videos, one being a Khan Academy that you'll have a study guide on. So let's get this material under our belts and start talking about the different aspects and some of the personalities, big events in detail over the course of the next 4 to 5 days. Have a good day, guys.